simple one. So welcome. My name is Christian Dupont, and I'm the Burns librarian, so the director of the John J. Burns Library for Rare Book Special Collections and Archives here at Boston College, which includes, yes, our Irish music archives, and you'll soon be meeting, but many of you know already, my colleague Beth Sweeney, who curates our Irish music archives, and so we'll be talking a little about the archives and, of course, Mícheál's relationship to us here at Boston College. But we have several of the family members here who are going to be spending most of the evening of our program here talking about Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin from different perspectives. And so for an evening like this, since we have several speakers and we're relaxed and I don't want to make this too formal by giving long introductions about everybody. And besides, this is the key point. All of the people here who are going to be speaking, apart from myself, Beth is an artist, she's a musician herself, okay? Our artists, and it's very hard to introduce an artist, because an artist, it's the art, right? And it's the person. So it doesn't matter, really, right? That you've been honored with this, award or degree or this or that, okay? So I'm gonna skip sort of that, and besides, we're here to celebrate the artist of the evening, as it were, Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin, and so that's who we're most wanting to honor here. So we'll each do that in our own ways. We will have time at the end of an hour and some, we'll go on for a little bit here, to talk, and so if there's some questions and you want to know a little bit more about the individuals and their own artistic background, certainly we can do that as we go along. Someone who also would have had offer a welcome this evening is Guy Biner, who many of you know as our Sullivan Chair of Irish Studies, Sullivan Ó Súilleabháin. He really wanted to be here this evening, okay, but unfortunately couldn't. The things have come up sort of in the last year. So on behalf of Irish Studies at Boston College, everyone very welcome this evening. And then I'm also looking at Anna Connolly Talkoff here. So as the president of the Irish Society of Boston, and I think those of you who were at the film screening last night, and many of you were, of course, the Irish Society has done a lot to help make this event come together. The moral encouragement, some financial support, a lot of promotion, and so if you want to learn more about the Irish Society of Boston, how to become a member, how to help other events come and enjoy things with us, we certainly welcome you to do that as well. In fact, I was even talking with others, friends, that some of you may not be on our regular mailing list. We're invited by a friend this evening, so if you'd like to come for more of these kind of events here at Boston College, we'd be glad to do that. So just let us know, and we can get on the mailing list and everything, because this is the special thing. For us to be able to share this kind of evening with you, really, this is what it's all about for us here. So with that, okay, our first artist of the evening here, Nóirín Ní Riain, you're going to come and stand next to me for a moment here, and then we're going to have you start reading and reminiscing about Mícheál, because. Tell us about how, when, and how you came to know Mícheál, and your journeys together here. I think that's what you want to start us off here this evening, because you're really at the very beginning of that artistic career. So, Nóirín Ní Riain.
Ará I dús spáire. Tá sé anna tábhachtach dósa bheithan sam, agus tugadh má bheithchas Christian as Beth. Agus tíobh sé go léir. Mar is saol eile fad nuair a tháinig trácht Mícheál, agus go mór mar bhualas leis an chéad lá gur dreastail sé sin ar an ollscoil. Agus cinnte nuair a bhíonn páistí go le duine, bhíonn an taobháil an láidir an son. So cha sé anna hochtach dósa. Agus Nóirín ní is a chun cadfa, cadar a déir me cadtá le rá agamsa tá na tráchtar an spirit naomh agus engel bhíhíl a bhí mar cuacht agus cabhar ag Mícheál Ó. As nóir Sweeney I dús bóire. Sweeney fear eile fad, leid óg fad, an chéad lá gur bhualas leis. Agus de bharas leis an athrú óntach ád mhór a dhéanse I réthe héal. Agus is bheith smirúilt in áiríre an tros sin a dhéanamar den chéile. Dear friends, and thanks to Christian and Beth. Good man, Finn.
First the Irish.
Absolutely. Well, I felt I had to start in Irish because the story of Mick and myself is very much enmeshed with the Irish language as well as with music. And so from the very first day that we met, we of course were brought up in Ireland where Irish is compulsory as a subject in school, but we all hated it. Because unlikely so, because it's taught and still to this day abominably bad. And so Luke will testify. And so we came to university with a mediocre approach to the Irish language. You know, we took it for granted. And imagine the first day you heard all of that story with Maggie's great interpretation or editing, whatever. And we sort of became the golden couple. We used to be called the golden couple because we were inseparable from that very first day that we met. And met on so many different levels at that time. And I have to say, I had many suitors. There were 11 boys and 11 girls in our class in first place. And I had 3 other men who were also looking at me. But certainly, it was no problem for me. Nick won out from the very, very start. And he used to often say to me that way back then, "Are you looking at me through rose-coloured spectacles?" And I suppose I was, you know. And so, with the Irish language, then we had Sean O'Reilly for 2 years, our first 2 years in university. And Sean was wonderful, of course, he inspired us all in the Irish language. And we heard him speak this beautiful tongue. And we said, God, we're going to do that. And then he took us down to his home, his Gaelic home in Ballavourna. And we all changed our names. Mick was Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin, as you saw in the beginning of there, and he became Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin. I was Nóirín Ní Riain, and I became Nóirín Ní Riain. We changed our names on the register. And then we used to go to, we knew we had no Irish really, we couldn't speak Irish fluently, and we wanted to do that more than anything, the pair of us. So we'd go up to Antanglin, which was the language centre in UCC, and we had a great man there, Padraig Tyers. I think you probably would have known him too, Helen. But he was wonderful and wouldn't let us off with anything, you know. And then so when we got out of university, we resolved. Sean died our second year at university at the age of 40. A tragedy. And we actually went to see him together in hospital when he was dying. But he inspired us. And so we all got to get together and started Pangur Bawn, which was this traditional group, and I was a singer and Mick the traditional player. And what we'd sing, that kind of repertoire. And because there had to be little beats in it for the Bowron, Luke there and all that. And then we went off to Amrine, to that Gaelic there, because I had been learning Shannon songs, traditional songs, from a man called Pill Era, who learned all his songs when he was a parapathetic teacher in Ring. And so I had all this repertoire of songs, and we weren't drinking it all the time. We took our first drinks at the age of 28. Now, we might have made up for it a little bit after that. But we would go down to the pub, down to Tiggle, and I'd start up singing a song, Lord of our souls, bringing back these songs that had been lost really in tradition. And the old fellas would come up to me and say, no, Neil, you haven't the right word there now. No, that's the wrong note. And so it was a very exciting time, and we spent that there. And of course, as you know, anybody learning a language, you have to go and live in the area, but not only that, but you learn from the children in the area, not from the adults, because the adults felt we were blow-ins, which we were. But the children, the Breed and Nickra, and they'd come on our way home, and I'd have the lemonade and biscuits out for them, and they'd teach us and say, oh, you can't say that, we'd never say that now. So I was so grateful to that young people. But then we heard about a job. It was I actually heard about this job that John A. Murphy was giving up in Cork, and I said, Mick, you must go for that. And he said, no, I'm quite happy. He was teaching in a vocational school, and I was teaching in a convent. And he said, no, but I kind of nudged him. I think that's what partners have to do sometimes, don't they? And so we went off back to Cork again, and we all started, of course, all that work that you saw. And then gradually, yes, 1980, I was finishing a master's on traditional songs in Irish. And Mick actually took a lovely photo one time, because that was the year Owen was born. And so I have my thesis here, a black thesis here, and a tiny, tiny baby on top of it. So these were the two products of 1980 for me. And so that started then a relationship. Around that time, we didn't really know the monks of Glenstone Abbey, but I knew the place. It had always been a second home for me, because I grew up just 5 miles from there. And so I used to take Mick there at Easter and so on. And gradually, we began to meet some of the monks. And that started a marvellous barter system, even though we weren't calling it that at the time, where we were learning chant from them, Gregorian chant, and they were learning traditional songs from us. And then that hit one of our recording companies, Gaelic, and they said, we'd like you to do a recording together of this. And so a very exciting time. So we came together as a couple, because of course if I came as a woman on my own to a group of 40 men, there was no way we were going to do anything with them at all. You were a woman and you were excluded, but I was safe with Mick. And he taught them, of course, he was the musical director. And it was a very beautiful time, and led to 3 recordings there, and us living there actually. When Owen was 2, Mícheál was on sabbatical from Cork. And we went and actually lived in that monastery, became friendly with 3 of the monks there, as close as any relationship. The 5 of us were inseparable, because they were interested in what a married couple were like. And of course we were interested in what monastery was like. And so there was Patrick, Richard's great friend, Kieran, also great friend, and Simon, the 3 friends. And so that led to a trilogy of recordings then. What else do I want to tell you about? There's so much there. So we were always making music together, even at home. We loved singing Elizabethan love songs. Gosh, can I remember any of them? But you'll know them yourself. Music for a while, and we could play away. We got great solace out of that. And we'd have cups of coffee and then run into the piano and do all of that relationship. But then, things began to we began to go our separate ways. And I was sort of going on a different career of my own, on a singing career, doing all sorts of work for the United Nations, and travelling for Europe. And so we began to go our separate ways. And then, when we were separating, I applied to Glenstone Abbey for a residency to live there actually. And so over 16 years I lived there up to 2016. I'm getting a nod here now from Luke to shut up. So anyway, that but always enmeshed. Even the last time that Mícheál and myself were on the altar together in Glenstone Abbey was at a funeral of Antar Sean O'Dean, when they asked Mícheál and myself to play and to think that they said, you just have 3 minutes now at the communion. And of course Mícheál being Mícheál, he went on, he played beautifully for about 8 minutes, you know, and the monks were all, come on, come on. And so that was the last time, and that was just the year before he died. But it's a great honour and a privilege to speak about it, and with Helen and Luke here too. Go on.
And that's why I couldn't introduce Mary, because she's introducing the evening front. We have a few students here this evening, and what you did, Nuri, just now, I'm going to interrupt you, right? Bringing us back more than 40 years ago with the vitality. We were in that moment just now, right? The freshness of vitality. This is what we all want to look forward to in life as we go on. So thank you for bringing that. Noreen is also, I didn't say this, besides your hearing, so I knew you would sing a little bit this night. And thank you for doing that. As an interfaith minister, and there's just something about, because we also, and you'll learn more about this as we go along, have a concert series. Actually began as a festival, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's now our Gaelic Roots Festival, a concert series, in which you have come and performed on occasions. And I know a very special night, I'm remembering a few years ago, in which that spirit, even more than the music, was with us, so thank you. All right, next year. So, I didn't show the program earlier, okay? So these are our steps this evening here. So, so Beth will join in a minute, and we'll talk a little about Mícheál and bringing Boston College, bringing Mícheál here, and then is bringing Irish music to us. Sheila Falls Keohane is our current director of the Gaelic Roots Concert Series, and will speak about her own collaborations with Mícheál. And then at least one of the brothers, the two brothers will be here in spirit. I guess Mícheál is not able to come and join us this evening, likewise here, family, but so Owen will be speaking on his behalf here. And then Helen, who spent a large part of her journey with Mícheál, will speak about the Irish World Academy and their collaborations and love together here as well. And then Maggie will kind of round us out here this evening. So those of you who may not have been able to get to the film last night at West Newton Cinema, we'll see some clips here of that, and we'll talk about the production and what the thought that went behind it. And those of you who did see it, may be wondering, how did all this beautiful cinematography, music, and everything come together? So Maggie will talk to us about that, and then we'll wrap up from there. All right, Beth, good, come on over. We'll Good. So Beth and I are going to read something. I think we're the only ones going to do a little reading tonight, okay? But this in many ways was sort of the easiest way to do this, certainly in a timely fashion as well, is to take what is largely an excerpt of an essay we have written for a volume, and I think you might say a little about that, Helen, as well, about the volume we're putting together of essays. Okay, good. So, so that was convenient for us here to do that, and since we partner on many things, we're kind of taking a paragraph at a time here, okay? So this will be kind of fun. So let's start here. So we're recalling our own recollections and at time with Mícheál. So I've been here at Boston College since 2014, and Beth, I always forget which year you started here. 89, right? So, okay. So keep that in mind, and the arc of history that Beth will be relating in her portions here. So you've been here for all of this time, and I came to know Mícheál just a bit later. So I think we should go ahead and start here, right? That one, right? Is that slide 3 here? There we go. Okay. So in June of 2018, Beth and I took a road trip through Southwest Ireland in the days leading up to a conference at University College Cork. It was a nice opportunity to visit friends and colleagues. Particularly memorable highlights were our visits with Mícheál at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, and the Dromore House, the country, estate, and county Tipperary he shared with Helen and Luke, and many instruments from around the world. Over coffee and cakes, we reminisced about how Irish traditional music had taken root and flourished over the years at Boston College, in no small part due to his presence and influence.
Mícheál's first visit to Boston College was in March 1979 during the week-long Irish Fortnight series, which was co-sponsored by Boston College and the Irish American Cultural Institute. And we have at least one person in the audience, Linda, who was present. For the closing event, Nóirín and Mícheál presented The Irish Woman in Song, a 2-hour program echoing the series theme of the Irish woman. At BC, Nóirín and Mícheál met professors Adele Dalsimer and Kevin O'Neill, who just a few months earlier had founded BC's Irish Studies program around their respective disciplines of literature and history. They had already collaborated with BC's Fine Arts Department, and Kevin recalls how the Irish Fortnight event brought music into the conversation as well. He said, "We had no budget, so Mick and Nóirín stayed at my place, and we had a chance to get to know each other and to know that there was a real need and opportunity to bring more Irish music to BC."
A few years later, Kevin and Adele went to Cork to expand BC's Irish Studies offerings by setting up a junior year abroad program at UCC. At the time, Mícheál was in the process of establishing an Irish music program at UCC, and so they had occasion to renew their acquaintance and earlier conversations. Mick wanted to make sure that the traditional Irish music program he was launching there would be available to our students, Kevin recalled. No one could fail to be struck by the enthusiasm and love that he had for the music. We agreed that we should work on ways to connect BC and UCC via music.
An opportunity to expand BC's music offerings came in 1989 when the university's music program became a department led by Anne Dhu McLucas. Anne's research interests included the traditional music of Ireland and Scotland. The synergy between Anne, Adele, Kevin, and others in the music department and Irish studies led to an offer to Mícheál to come to BC for a joint visiting appointment in music and Irish studies for the spring semester of 1990.
Mícheál's 6 months at BC were highly productive and formative. As a visiting professor of ethnomusicology, he taught courses in Irish music, brought guests to the classroom, and organized the landmark fiddle festival, My Love is in America, which fittingly took place within the university's historic main building, Gasson Hall, in the large hall that had been given to the university by Boston's Irish community. Among other stellar musicians, Mícheál recruited Clare-born fiddle champion Seamus Connolly, who was then living and working in the Boston area, to perform in the festival and to assist with engaging other players.
The Boston College Irish Fiddle Festival weekend in March 1990 featured 16 of the finest traditional Irish fiddle players in the United States, accompanied by Mel Mercier on bodhrán. The musicians gathered the day before the concert to work with Mick on setting the program for the following night. Kevin recalled that as Mick worked his magic, the many different personalities became a community. I was aware that I was witnessing a historic moment, the reconnection of strands of traditional culture that had been severed by the diaspora.
Mícheál arranged to have the festival recorded, along with oral history interviews he conducted at Burns Library with a few of the performers. From the audio tapes of the final concert, he produced a critically acclaimed CD, My Love is in America. He then transferred the master tapes to Burns Library and advocated for BC to create an archive focusing on Irish music in America. The archive was officially established in Burns Library later that year.
Following Mícheál's professorship, Seamus Connolly received an appointment in the music department to teach weekly Irish fiddle classes to the BC community and to help coordinate public events. Soon afterward, the music department began offering courses such as Introduction to Irish Folk Music, as well as weekly classes in tin whistle and Irish dance. In fact, our colleague Jack Kearney, who is a digital archive specialist in Burns Library, had the good fortune as a BC student to take the Intro to Irish Folk Music class from Mícheál. With the support of the Boston community, BC hosted a Shannon singing festival in 1991 and a Celtic Harp Festival in 1992. Seamus recalled these festivals brought the attention of the community at large, who asked that we bring musicians playing different instruments such as fiddle, accordion, flute, pipes, and tin whistle, as well as singers and Irish dancers. Seamus did bring them in the fall of 1993 under the heading of Gaelic Roots. His innovations broadened the program, and he ran a highly successful weekend of classes, concerts, and lectures.
Seamus's decision to call BC's festival Gaelic Roots and to incorporate various musical traditions was influenced by UCC's traditional music offerings, which, during Mícheál's tenure, had included a festival of music from Cape Breton Island. After BC's second Gaelic Roots weekend in the festival in 1995, Seamus joined the Irish Studies faculty full-time and began organizing an annual Gaelic Roots summer school and festival that would last a full week. From 1997 to 2003, students of all ages came to campus each June to learn music, song, and dance from faculty hailing from Ireland, Scotland, England, Canada, and the United States.
In March 2003, Seamus invited Mícheál back to BC in order to mentor BC's student musicians and perform a concert with members of the BC community. The Between Worlds concert featured traditional music alongside some of Mícheál's classical compositions and arrangements. Later that year, after the Gaelic Roots festivals ended, Seamus began hosting events in an academic year series that has continued the Gaelic Roots name and tradition ever since. Weekly instruction and in fiddle and whistle also continued, taught not only by Seamus, but also by music instructors such as Jimmy Noonan and Sheila Falls Keohane, with dance classes taught by instructors such as Kieran Jordan.
Jordan, there you are. In 2004, BC appointed Seamus as the inaugural holder of the Sullivan Artist in Residence Chair, sponsored by BC graduate and benefactor G. Craig Sullivan and his wife Maureen Sullivan. The following year, Seamus invited Mícheál back to BC to perform in the rebranded Gaelic Roots Music, Song, Dance Workshop and Lecture Series. In the Irish Room of Gaston Hall, the site of the 1990 Fiddle Festival, Mícheál accepted an honorary alumnus award for contributions to the university. Mícheál then performed his piano variations on a 12th century Irish plain chant tune, followed by a few of his own arrangements of Irish traditional melodies. He would return to Gaston Hall once more in fall 2012 to give a Gaelic Roots concert featuring solo piano, a duet with Seamus, and a collaboration with a string quartet led by Sheila Falls Keohane, who has directed the Gaelic Roots Series since Seamus's retirement in 2015.
Following the precedent that Mícheál set in 1990, recordings of BC's Gaelic Roots festivals, as well as from the ongoing Gaelic Roots series, are routinely added to Burns Library's Irish Music Archives. The collecting ideas he articulated for the archives included other types of material as well. In recent years, the library has been fortunate to expand its Irish music holdings with manuscript collections such as the papers of Seamus Connolly and of Mary O'Hara, collections of rare audio recordings, rare printed materials, and examples of traditional instruments.
During our summer 2018 conversation at Dromore House, Mícheál enthusiastically gave us permission to add his 4 oral history video interviews from 1990 to our YouTube channel. Sadly, it would be our last meeting with him. We're preparing these videos for release in the fall of that year, when Irish folk singer Karen Casey, during a special Gaelic Roots memorial concert honoring Craig Sullivan, broke the news of Mícheál's passing earlier that night. She offered a spontaneous and moving tribute, and it's followed by a plaintive vocal piano performance of Súilleabháin. I wish I was on yonder hill, 'tis there and sit I'd cry my fill, until every tear would turn a mill, Súilleabháin. How we miss Mícheál, how we love Mícheál's family. The love he's brought us here in America, and especially in Boston. started. Now I forgot. I think we're next to you then, Sheila. Is that right? No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good. All right. So Sheila has already been introduced multiple times in this as our Gaelic Roots director here. So Sheila, and of course, brings a lot of her own music and career to us here at Boston College. So please.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thanks. Well, the best thing, one of the greatest things I heard tonight was Nóirín say that she hated learning the Gaelic language because for years my mother said this to me. I wondered why we didn't learn any, why she didn't have any. She said she hated it. She absolutely hated it. So I only know how to bless myself. That's all that's left. Now because of it. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, so I have the honor and privilege to continue the work that Mícheál started so many years ago, and I direct the Gaelic Roots Series here that has now become this series during the school year, and I invite artists from Ireland, from around the world to come and present concerts. This was passed on to me from Seamus Conley, and I studied with Seamus when I was young, and competed in the All-Ireland, and he was my mentor for many, many years. And so he brought me here actually to play a concert. I played a Gaelic Roots concert, and then around the same time as when he said Mícheál was coming, and would I arrange a string quartet to play his compositions. So I do remember back in 1990 when I was graduating from New England Conservatory. I was completely immersed in classical music at the time, and I lived these two worlds, so I really identified with Mícheál over the years. Anytime, I remember being a kid, and anytime I heard this music that brought my two worlds together, it was like a spark for me, really. And because it wasn't done, and I remember going to Ireland and being told, do not show any bit of classical training. And I worked really hard, really hard every day to hide that and really find that Irish music that I grew up with. And then in the classical music world, I never told anybody that I played any fiddle because you couldn't do those things. You couldn't do those things, right? So if that tells you what I felt when I heard this music, that was like, oh my goodness, you can do these two things. And I am keenly aware of the courage it takes to do that, because he was a composer, right? Classical composer, but he was really connected to his Irish roots and music. And so, you know, there are going to be the naysayers that, I can't even imagine that no one kind of said anything to him, because it was said to me. And it takes courage, and it's people like Mícheál that opened doors for so many musicians after him to explore and reach across boundaries and bring all these other cultures. And I remember hearing from a trad player, who I won't say who it is, but said to me, well, you know, he was concerned that you'd lose the traditional music. And actually, you'd lose the traditional music if you never did what Mícheál did, right? You know, it would stay in the pub, maybe, and just be its own little circle. But he blew those doors off and brought all these other cultures in. And so I'm really appreciative of that. And over the years, little bits and pieces have popped of his music has popped into my world, and it is just such an amazing thing to hear. So I continue this work that he started, and around the Gaelic Roots Series, I have a couple of fiddle classes here at Boston College, and they are dedicated, enthusiastic fiddle students, and they come to the concerts I remember I just had Frankie Gavin of Dedan fame and Kevin Burke, two icons of the fiddle world recently, and I had a student leave and she said, goals, when she heard how amazing these players are. So it's a rich program. We're so lucky that he had this vision and brought that to BC so many years ago. And I'm thankful Seamus Conley brought me on. I had a collaboration with him just the one time. Because I was in both classical and Irish music all the time, I was asked by Seamus to put a string quartet together for 2012 when Mícheál was coming. So I said I would, and I had been performing with the Boston Symphony, doing some outreach with them, kind of doing this classical Irish thing that they, I thought it was interesting that the BSO wanted to put Irish music out there to draw more audience members in. And so I did this a lot, and I reached out to my BSO friends and said, would they play this event? And everybody was game because we were doing this all the time. And Mícheál, I got this phone call. I was like, it was Mícheál on the phone. And he wanted to talk about the program. He had sent me all the scores, and we spent time on the phone talking through every score and his vision for every single score, what he was thinking, what he wanted to put out there, and how he wanted each piece to be played. And so I took notes, and then I had all the recordings. And so I studied this music. I sent the music to my colleagues, and we got together that afternoon, and we sat down with Mícheál and just worked through an intense rehearsal, kind of like what he did in that first Boston College performance. And he worked with us, and it was just an amazing performance. And I remember the cellist from the Boston Symphony saying, "This is really good music. This is really, really well written." Because you could sit down. I've been in so many positions where I've played Irish music where, I was on a symphony stage and they said, "Oh, you'll do the encore and we'll arrange it," and it's just awful. Like, have no clue. But this man knew how to frame Irish music in such a way that kept the integrity and the roots of the music, but then opened it up and opened your eyes to what chords could go behind this music, and just expand and open up your ears. And I'm so thankful for that. So I will continue this work, and I'm lucky to have Irish Studies and Guy Biner that are big supporters of music and Irish music here at BC. And so I'm just thankful for everything Mícheál has given us.
We're very thankful for you, Sheila, being here all these many years. 1 year adds to the next, right? It's been a few years. It's just great, yeah?
Yeah.
Good, continue on.
I had to do the math.
Yeah.
What's been in here?
Okay. Don't look back, just keep going. Well, we do look back, but with great, again, fondness, and we draw from that as we go forward. Right? I mean, it's really wonderful. So, that's nice. Okay. So we have one son and one brother. Okay. The other brother was explained to talk about Mole in his absence there, I guess. Right? That's what you get in it. So, a few minutes. So, here we are. Good.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, extraordinary. I have 12 minutes, so it's torture. You'll have to come and spend a week with me, and I'll tell you a little bit about Mícheál. But I'd like to just mention an aspect, a lens to look at Mícheál with, and that's the lens of social justice. And when we talk about music, we're talking not just about some kind of abstract vibration, some kind of sounds or a recording. We're talking about people. And when we talk about culture, we're talking about a history that the music has come through. And so why was it that Sheila was feeling this taboo around revealing an identity within a certain place, and that's because of a history, and a history of social injustice. And that's why what Mícheál was doing was revolutionary, actually. It was extremely radical. It presented itself as an extraordinary dynamic type of sound and energy. And that's the aesthetic experience, and that's what is pleasant and fun and energizing. But behind that fun and energy is an extraordinarily radical and revolutionary manifesto that he lived. And he was explicit about it in his art, in his music, and in his education. And he was implicit about it. He was very private about this mission of his, actually. And perhaps even he didn't have the words for it. And so when Maggie was making this documentary, I was not going to take part in it initially, and I was going to let others speak for Mícheál, and not have his son, saying, oh, he was a lovely man, and I was going to let others say he was a lovely man. But then, of course, that wasn't, never say no to Maggie. Because you'll end up doing the most amazing things. So we had this amazing conversation, and a series of conversations, and what manifest was Maggie had me and my brother input creatively in the documentary, and that was the carrot we needed, and off we went. And Mícheál's redress around social justice was one of the great things that inspired me in my life. And Seamus Heaney, the great poet, was an extraordinary firebrand leader for the voice of his generation when it came to redressing social injustices that are still present to this day. And Seamus managed to walk that line. And Seamus talked about the redress of poetry, how poetry and how art redresses injustice in society, how the artist is there to rebalance something. And that's what great art does, is it sees an imbalance. Society is leaning over this way and it's going to topple, and the artist then starts to load the scales on the other side. And that's really great art, really great poetry, really great mission, a great way to live. And so Heaney represented that in Mícheál's life, and towards the end of his life he printed out, he typed out one of Heaney's poems, the poem Mint, which I presented on the documentary. He typed it out, printed it, and cut it. And he taped it up on his mirror in his bathroom. And we talked about myself and Mick, we talked about everything. And we argued the whole night. We'd have the greatest chats. And he was hilariously funny and brilliant. Loved an argument, And as his son, of course, I'd be redressing, the things, having a great time. And you knew just what to say. And we'd get a layout then from him, which was the Irish for lecture. Oh, I feel a layout. There's a layout coming on. And there would be a layout coming on. And you'd be there for 30 minutes. And it was magnificent fun. But I rarely pushed him on Heaney, actually, looking back on it. And I did that intuitively. I didn't do that on purpose. And I never asked him why he put Heaney, Mint, up on his window. I never asked him about it. And I asked him about everything else. But for some reason, there was something intuitively sacred about him having that there. And so I thought but the poem is, I'm not, like with everything with Heaney and with everything with great poetry, I don't really know what the poem's about, but I think it's about social justice. And so I want to recite that again for you this evening, within this context and within what you're hearing, and then maybe just talk about one or two other things in his life which really were dramatic expressions of a revolutionary identity. So Heaney in Mint, I'll recite the poem, then maybe I'll give an idea of what it means to me, but I want you to imagine this and to hear this within the context of social justice. Maybe you can tell me what this poem is about after this. So Heaney says, it looked like a clump of small, dusty nettles growing wild at the gable of the house, beyond where we threw our refuse and old bottles, unverdant ever, almost beneath notice. But to be fair, it also spelled promise and newness in the backyard of our lives. As if something callow yet tenacious sauntered in green alleys and grew rife. The snip of scissor blades, the light of Sunday mornings when the mint was cut and loved. My last things will be first things taken from me. And yet let all things go free that have survived. Let the smells of mint go heady and defenseless, like inmates liberated in that yard. Like the disregarded ones we turned against because we'd failed them by our disregard. Like the disregarded ones we turned against because we had failed them by our disregard. So there we have something beneath contempt, in a place that is where we don't bring the visitors. You know, it's not the good room. It's where we throw our refuse and our trash. And yet, at a certain time, on a Sunday with the lamb, you know, with the lamb roast, the mint is cut. And this is a sacred moment. So suddenly that which is beneath contempt can be actually sanctified and becomes a blessing. And so I think Heaney is saying that perhaps, what in our lives are we disregarding? What do we look down upon? And when I'm in this country talking about the journey of Irish traditional music, I often use the words that Irish traditional culture, Gaelic culture at a time in Ireland in the 50s, the 60s, was seen as a hillbilly or redneck culture, yeah? It was considered a basket of deplorability. It was something that was repulsive, actually, for a genteel and civilized, progressive, forward-looking Ireland that was embracing globalization of English speaking and of technology and of science. And Irish culture was holding us back, actually, from this great utopian future. And then people like Seamus Heaney come along, people like Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin, and they snip this mint and they say, actually, no, this is something that is the garnish that leavens this extraordinary experience of community. And we all applaud, oh my goodness, it sounds fabulous. And sometimes we can forget how revolutionary and how controversial such a thing is, yeah? And in hindsight, it doesn't look controversial at all, actually. It looks like, sure, there's no big deal at all. But you just saw Sheila there, it was beautiful how you actually presented that sense of challenge and difficulty that doing that was, 30 years ago. And today it's no big deal. A classical musician can play with a traditional musician and no one bats an eyelid. But that wasn't what was happening. What was happening was this folk peasant culture was meeting an aristocratic courtly culture. And the aristocratic courtly culture was coming out of Western Europe, which was a viciously colonial ideology that saw humanity as commodity to be extracted, exploited, vanquished, and used. And Irish traditional culture was coming out of that population that was exploited by that courtly culture. So classical music there represents that courtly ideology that sees the world as a mechanism. And Irish folk culture comes out of something that sees the world as an organic, ineffable, almost pre-linguistic reality. Yeah? And it's very easy to pick sides in this story. And people were always trying to do that with Seamus Heaney. Which side are you on? Are you Catholic now or Protestant? Are you green or are you orange? And brilliantly, he never was pulled into that trap. And Mícheál was also extremely inspired by Heaney's path that he walked and was always very careful not to fall into that trap too. I think partly because his view of this was so much more complex than taking one side. And instead of taking a side, I'm going to end by talking about the image of the river. And if you were to ask which side of a river are you on, you start to see how superficial or how abstract, how ridiculous even the concept of taking a side is. And if you were to look at a river as its journey of source all the way down as it grows and tributaries growing into it, opening up into lakes, branching off into different streams, coming back together, then hitting a tidal estuary, and then an estuary going out into an ocean. And if you were to say to someone now, what side of the river are you, what part of the river are you on, which part of the river is more important? Is the estuary more important, where there's this glorious ascension into the universal ocean? Or is the source of the river more important, from which there would be no estuary at all? So which side of the river is more important? Which side is the more supreme, the more important, the more beautiful? And when you start to ask those questions, you see how ridiculous that concept is. Culture and humanity is a river, and Mícheál was very articulate about that. So that's all I can say within this very short period of time. So thank you very much.
We are so fortunate here at Boston College. Now, I don't know what your brother Mícheál, right, Molly, would have done with his 12 minutes had we given him 12 minutes, okay?
We'd have had 6 each, so I don't know.
Well, 6 each, right, so we got a lot out of you here. Now but to say a little more about both of you, since you said very little about yourself, which is your way, right? The brothers, you might have sung a song together. You might have, right? Because you do perform together. And you perform with your mother, both and individually. You have your own solo careers, and this is where it's, the beautiful life of artist here. And your brother is also a poet, so those are it, right? And you might have written a little verse yourself.
A bit,
Sure, yeah.
And it was one of his poems that ended the film.
One of his, right? So you, but especially Molly's been the poet here, right? Yeah, and write beautiful poetry here. So, but you, and this is where we're so fortunate again at Boston College. Many of us are still buzzing from just 2 weekends ago, right? We had Mari and Catherine Heaney here, for a 10-year, retrospective, Shane and Simi Afterlives, and it was about the theme. It was started off with a Thursday night talk that threaded through the whole thing on the political Heaney. Fintan O'Toole gave this talk because he's the biography here, and he's trying to grapple with the same thing, which is a very interesting thing to hear you talk about, the way you did it just beautifully there, taking the simple poem of Mint, but thinking about a conversation you never had with your dad, but you did, because you were looking at the mirror, just looking at him, and then going back and forth, and now you're thinking about Mint and social justice, right? I mean, you might not have pulled that out of, yourself reading that poem, myself reading that poem, whatever, but to think about that when we're listening to what's happening in a composition, it sounds peaceful and harmonious, but there's struggle and everything, and it's beautiful, right, of this melding and the between worlds aspect. So I don't know what Molly would have done with even 6 minutes, but I think you did something on both of them. All right, so one more family here. This is your turn, Helen. Okay, you ready? Okay. So actually, I can introduce Helen a little bit, and because some of you have remarked on the little acorn, it's really a hazelnut here, right? That I'm wearing, a silver one. I think Beth one's got on her lapel later this evening, and these are very special gifts that Helen, after Mícheál passed on, just wanted to give people who, in one way or another, and this is where it's very humbling to think that a part that we've been doing again so fortunately at Boston College to be able to welcome you many times to our campus and to bring you here to share yourselves with us. So this hazelnut that represents creativity and wisdom, I put with great love and pride. So thank you, Helen, for that, and please tell us about your very special journey in the latter part of Mícheál's life here and your collaboration around the Irish World Academy and more. So there we are.
When you're a Christian, help me with my.
Yeah, so that's right. We have to
get myself plugged in here.
So,
hello, everybody. It's just been such a gift of an evening to share with you all here today and with our family here today, and I'm very grateful that sometimes it takes something like an event like this to allow something like this to pass between us all. So thank you for being part of that with us. I want to use my short time here to talk about, as Christian said, something called the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. I arrived the year the Academy was established, 1994. I didn't know then I would spend the next 22 years of my life there working with Mícheál to kind of build the vision of what the Academy would be, and that's what I'd like to just share with you a little bit this evening. Before, when we were just met over in Burns Library, Beth asked us, would it be okay if we recorded this evening? And Maggie said straight away, of course, it's so important that these things are recorded, because how else do other people get to hear it? And I thought to myself, it's what the filmmaker and the archivist have in common, this commitment to the trace. And I'm very grateful to Beth and to Christian who have helped us with Mícheál's own personal archive and trying to maintain the trace of that, which is so much, I think, of what the film is doing, the book is doing, the concert doing. So I wanted to start with an example of that trace, a piece from Mícheál's own archive, a letter that he wrote to Christian and Beth mentioned earlier, to Andrew McLucas, and you can see that in 1992, a dear colleague here from Boston. For reasons I cannot mention, I have to blank out the beginning of the letter. We won't go into that. But the second part of the letter talks about how Andrew introduced him initially to Apple computing, and he remained a firm fan for the rest of his life. But the piece that I've picked out, that I'd just like you to read there, that he wrote to Andrew in 1992, was, I am obsessed now with a vision of a world music centre, which I feel should be located in Ireland. I see no reason why it should not be Cork. This has been with me on and off since 1989, that was in Boston, and it now seems to be taking on a life of its own. I think something is either going to happen quickly now, or else this idea will fall on its face. Well, two things we can say about that. One is that it did not fall on its face. The other is, it did not happen in Cork. It happened in Limerick. And so I guess I wanted to share that with you to show that this seed of what would become the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance started germinating here in Boston. And probably started even before that in the stories Nóirín was sharing with us about the very important years in Cork, and realizing, and I think Sheila alluded to this, realized there was something fundamentally wrong with the way we were teaching music. And that realization, which was growing in him through his years in Cork, through his years in Boston, led to what became the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. And an extraordinary thing happened in that he was offered the chair of music in the same year in both University College Cork and the University of Limerick. And I think, and Nóirín would be able to attest to this, a whole part of his heart would have stayed in Cork and to build something there. But what was different about Limerick was that it was a green site. He had the opportunity to build something from scratch. And I guess what he would have been facing in Cork was exactly what Sheila was talking about earlier, the utter domination of literacy within the university tradition, a tradition that that privileged literacy since the medieval establishment of the universities. And that may seem like a very small factor. If you think of something about studying music in a university and having to be able to read music to get to do a degree. Just think about that, having to do a reading entrance exam. Because of that, a whole number of musical traditions could not be in universities. So if you were from an oral tradition culture, if you were a jazz musician, if you were a popular music singer, could you pass your written exam? Not unless you had studied notation. If you were from almost every single non-Western musical culture in the world, you would not pass that entrance exam. You might have a different literate tradition, but you would not necessarily be able to, so you couldn't study. And here's another another irony of the way in which music was taught. Even though the literate tradition rested very strongly on Western classical music, the performance of that music was not privileged in universities. It was the reading of the music, the analysis of the music, the composition of the music, the stuff that left the literate trace. The performance was ephemeral, so the performance had a secondary place within this tradition. And if performance had a secondary place, of necessity, the part of music that goes hand in glove with it in almost every single world tradition, which is dance, could not even be considered in the university curricula. So the vast majority of the world's music and dance couldn't get past the entrance exam. And this is the world that Mícheál was encountering in Cork, in Boston, in his own teaching. This was the barrier that he had started to break down in Cork by that very simple, as Owen said, radical move of removing a sight reading test to get into a music department. He often used to say you could find a traditional musician studying engineering, dentistry, French, business, you couldn't find them in the music department until that entrance exam was removed. And that radical moment of revolution, he described it himself as setting off a bomb in a music department, opened up this world. So he had that choice to try to do this in Cork, where he would be bringing all of this in on top of that old tradition, or to start something new, to take a risk with a new university, a young university, a university that had never had a chair of music before. And that's what he set out to do in Limerick. And this little diagram here, I saw this for the first time on a napkin, on a train coming down from Dublin, where he was saying, this is what the Irish World Academy is going to be. And he drew this little thing like a tree in the middle, and he said, every single thing we do, our clár and our taiga, our programs and our research, every single thing we do will combine reflection and practice. You may not research in the academy, you may not research music without making music. You would think that's self-evident until you saw the number of doctorates of people who never play music, doctorates in musicology. So you cannot do research in music or dance without dancing or singing. And you cannot perform without being reflexive, without studying the trace material of that work. So it wasn't an either or, it was a both and. And the trunk of the tree was supported by the ballach, by the community outreach, that there was an understanding that our ability to teach something like Irish traditional music or dance was only as good as the community thought it was. If the community didn't stand over those, you could have a BA or an MA or a PhD, but it wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on if you didn't have the imprimatur of the local community. And that every single thing we did in the Irish World Academy would be surrounded by artists. Like we were saying there, Christian, this is a world of creators, because the best way you can teach students is to bring in a bunch of artists and get out of the way. And it's what happens when those people are in the room that is the real creative magic. And a lot of people would have taken that and created their 5-year plan, which he did eventually. But before he did that, he said, I'm going to find an artist. And he found an artist called James Scanlon, a really wonderful Cork-based stained glass artist, and said, that's the Irish World Academy, create that for me. And James created the logo of the Irish World Academy. And that is our sonic map. That's the Irish World Academy. And every time that appears on a piece of paper or a brochure, that is embedded in it. And the Irish World Academy, to me, is this magnificent building, which you can see the living bridge here, which is just right at the foot of the River Shannon at one side, and behind it you can see the hills of Clare surrounding it, and between the river and the hills is this extraordinary place of creativity. So the Irish World Academy, to me, is that place, but of course more than that, it's the people who make the music, and that's really what I want to show you today. Just share with you 3 minutes of a small sense of the research, the performance, the artists, the community who are the Irish World Academy. Finish with a final thought and just a last little 90-minute clip. Last year I became the director of the Irish World Academy, and I spent a lot of my time thinking about, where next year we're going to celebrate our 30th anniversary, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what's going to happen to the next generation of students who come through the academy, and what kind of legacy have I been able to embody over the last 30 years that I can bring to that. And if there's a single idea that directs me in that, it is the question about who gets to belong. And I think that Owen is absolutely correct when he says that for Mícheál, the Irish World Academy was not only about music and dance. In fact, he once said, when somebody asked him what was the Irish World Academy, he said, I don't know what the Irish World Academy is, but I can tell you what it's not about. It's not about music and dance. And I think what he meant by that is exactly, Owen, what you were saying, that for him, music and dance were the power, the magic that was at his disposal, that he had been gifted with to bring to the world and to say, what can I do with this? And he realized, like that little entrance exam that I talked about, that singing a person's song, allowing a person to share their music with you, to be confident and proud in your own music and your own culture, and to share that with others, was a radical act of inclusion. And this question about who gets to belong, who is at the table, is the question that informs the Irish World Academy. And for me, I'm going to leave you with the last clip. You saw a small bit of it just at the end of the previous video. And for me, this is embodied every week in something that I'm involved in called the Irish Home Music Cafe. And we bring the Academy downtown. And we have an hour and a half every Thursday morning of music and dance and coffee and collaboration. And it's for anybody who arrives into Limerick, and particularly newcomers, a lot of the people who are coming to Ireland as refugees and asylum seekers now. And we spend this time doing music and singing together. And when I'm in, the little clip I'm going to show you was from a day when the Lord Mayor happened to decide he was going to come down to the cafe. And what I love about this is that he arrived in with his button accordion. And the only way that you know he's the mayor is because he has the chains on. But when you look at this, you can see actually there's no way of knowing who's a refugee, who's a student, who's a musician, who's an academic, who's the Lord Mayor, you know, who's there from the Ukraine, from Palestine, who's an international student, who's an academic. What you're seeing is a group of people making music together. And I am mindful when I think of Gaza, when I think of the Ukraine, when I think of Dublin last week, that we have powerful agency in the work that we do through culture. So whether it is through filmmaking, or whether it is through archiving, or whether it is through singing or dancing or making music, we are engaged in a most radical act of inclusion. So I'll leave you with these last 90 seconds, and thank you so much.
Fortunate at the University of Limerick to have you now, Helen Phelan, as the director of the Irish.
I'm sorry, Christian, for taking over here, but I think this needs to be said. Yes, Mícheál had the vision and the dream, but I saw from the very beginning that without Helen Phelan, the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance would not have existed and would not be there now.
Poor Maggie.
Thank you, Helen. You know, I'm trying to suppress the trite expression. Well, you know, it's a tough act to follow unless you're the director of a film production company. So I guess I'll go there, Maggie,
Mariarach You can't bait that. I suppose, yeah, just America there is Gael Goro Hochas Misha, Rugag agus Togag, Sarain a Kuntar Fortlariga me, Átacha, Nóirín agus Mícheál Blian Darhail. So I suppose we're going back to the start in some ways, I guess, on this journey that we have been in this room. So I'm from Nóirín in County Waterford, which is, I have to plug this in, I think. I suppose which is one of the places where Nóirín and Mícheál started their journey, and their journey into trying to Dullinglech, Neshantanga, agus le Priya. So if you look at all we've spoken about, everyone has spoken about in the last hour and a half, I guess, I'm that kid from the marginalised community as well. Sorry, I don't want everyone singing on my dodgy notes. Go ignore music, that's it. Oh well. But I am that kid from the marginalised community. I am that child who grew up being different because my first language was Gaelic. Being different because my mum and dad didn't necessarily speak Irish to me. So I struggled as a young child in a Gaelic area full of youth, of Gaelic and everything that Ireland was supposed to stand for. And when you think of the millions that left Ireland, what was left in the country afterwards is people like us that were conflicted also, that had this language, but didn't maybe respect it in the way that we should have had, and didn't understand the wealth of what we had. And I guess I grew up, and I'm kind of changing tact a little bit from what I planned to say, but it's kind of funny, and it's in typical fashion of being from a Gaelic area, which is actually, do you know what, I'm just going to show a video because it's a beautiful place first, so that you see the landscape. And there's a little shot in this where you'll also see, I guess, every field in this, my father and my grandfather would have been able to name. And there was a name for every field, and there was a name for everyone that owned it. So there's pride in that. And it was Margaret Nóirín, they were blow-ins, but my God, did they leave some legacy. So now I have to do this, I think. And this is it. No, not at all, it won't be long enough. But this is Helvig, this is moving out onto Helvig Head. There's Dungarvan across the way. Every field that you see there, that's actually Old Parish, which is a little bit outside of Onrine. But that's the road. This is Ceann Helvig and Ballinall. But every field, this is where Nóirín and Mick went to. This is my place. This is our place. That's a secret beach that you could walk down to as kids, which was quite dangerous to do. But this is where we're talking about. This is the inspiration. This is the inspiration for Mick and for many creatives that moved, and I suppose maybe people that left Ireland that would have dreamed of. This is it. This is Dúchas and Ceol and Dúchas and our Dúchas. But I'm going to show you another little video in my research this morning, and I think you'll enjoy this because it goes back again in a nice way to what we're talking about. What we're talking about, and I love this. I love it because actually I'm going to let it speak for itself because it's a nice little surprise. I think I was crying again this morning watching this in a fancy cafe in Boston. But please open. There we go. This is nice. So this is Nematon, another television production company in Ireland that recorded this. Oh, sorry. This is back to our roots. Oh, sorry.
They're always busy. Wish to weather and all through the section. Here, why can't sway in the cloth for me? We should only wash in. Kasula didn't also. No, Kasula Reen. The high say the old Tisha Clark, the Tisha and Kyo, Tisha and Shannon. Agus bhíon sort of movement sinna going because what he sang came from like some ancient memory source.
So
that belonged to much more than just him or everyone who went before. That communicated itself. And when you listen to it, something very ancient reverberated in yourself.
So that goes on for a while, but I guess what I'm going back to is the source. And that's Mícheál Ómy next door neighbour who lived in a house with no electricity, even though it was there at the time. And I know that Mícheál and Nóirín spent time there in that house with Mícheál. But what Mícheál did for me that wasn't even born when they were there was an understanding, a glimmer that maybe we had something in those green fields. And maybe we weren't the forgotten ones and the stupid ones that stayed at home working the fields. That maybe there was a reason. And by Mícheál spending time in my area, that started my journey into, I suppose, always having a fascination with Mícheál and who he was and what he stood for. And to bring it round a little bit then, to going back again to who Mícheál was and is, and it speaks a little bit to Owen's social justice, maybe, and his eye and his understanding. It's kind of funny in its own way. So growing up, we had the Gaelic 1976 album, LP, and on one of the tunes on it, and it's on the documentary, was Bonaparte, Trasnú na Riain, which I think is slightly like Fíoch Bhadra Rua, which we had in Onrain, a song. And we grew up with that album, and my granny used to sit there and we'd play the album, and she would say, "They're friends of mine, Nóirín Ní Riain and Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin. Didn't I teach them how to sing?" And I was there looking at my granny without a nose in her head going, wow. And this was serious, like, and then I was going, where did she? I don't think she can sing. But anyway, so then the funny part was, of course, in and around, when you grow up in that area, you have to be part of the tradition. So in school, you had to sing. And my God, there was a day I was in school and the maestra stood there and there was lovely Mícheál Óon her LP, and it came to my turn to sing the Connerys. I won't even try it, but anyway, I burst out laughing. Just thought, I couldn't do it, and all I could do was laugh. So I laughed my way through. Anyway, the next thing is he said, so Maggie is my name, but Warréad is the Irish. So if you're called a Warréad, I knew I was in trouble. So he said, Warréad, Fanishtik Trish, let's go there. So I was kept in after school. And I was cycling up the road, and as I was coming up Mooney's Hill, there's a hill at bend on it, and it's fairly big. Cycling and very frustrated with the world. I looked to the side, and there was Mícheál Ó Súilleabháin sitting on the side of the wall outside the post office smoking a cigarette. He looked at me and he said, "Ha tú Diana, you're late." And I was like, "Your fault." With the Connerys. But I went home to Nana that evening, and when I was talking, I was saying, "I'm leaving Ring. I hate this place. I hate Onrain. I'm going to do different things." So I did. I started my career a couple of years later in media and television and all of that. And I had a chance to meet with Mícheál in Dublin. And of course I was like, sure, he knows who we are. And up I go. And I look at Mícheál and I was like, "You know my grandmother, you know me." He had a strange look on his face, and I said, "She lives at the top of Ballinaghow, small house," or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, "I do," but I could know that he didn't. So I joked off and I said, "It's all right." I know he probably didn't. But years and years later, and the connection started then, I guess. And I just thought, thank you for not embarrassing me or just doing the nice thing. And then he was doing a Sean O'Reilly program in Cork, and in his jovial, jokey way, I was walking across. I was only a production assistant, and I was walking across the stage. And he looked at me and he said, "Cunnas a hon should get to Ryan." I was Cunnas a hon the Hannibal. And I thought, how could you not fall in love with that type of a person that lived in your hometown, that brought you and made you feel 100 feet taller as a production assistant? And the fascination has grown and grown and grown, and you talk about social injustice, and I met Nóirín and Owen and that. I used to volunteer in Calcutta, and that was there, and that connection and that world where I suppose we live, and we go back to the source. But it's people like Mícheál that open doors and opens their hearts and their minds. And I suppose, I guess I'm the product from Onrain in 1974, I think it was, Nóirín, of that little sprinkle of stardust that Mícheál said he was coming to the well. He might have taken from the well and dispersed it into beauty, but my God, did he encourage through being there and understanding that anything was possible from a small corner in the west of Europe, where maybe sometimes we're a little bit odd. So that's, I suppose, that was my journey, and my journey in understanding and trying to elevate and take Mícheál to another level with making this feature documentary. And the time with his family and with everybody, and trying to make it a story that would represent what he would want. And I guess every time I went to the edit room or to the interviews, I just had to look and go, what story am I telling? Who was he? How was he? And it was through the music and through the poetry that I thought was the most beautiful way. And his family, your interviews were just incredible. Owen's additional music scores, and it was just, you know, I hope that it's safe and that that's there, and I just wish we could have made it when he was alive, but that's arts programming and that's the way, you know, that, and it's a pity that we had to do it in his absence, but it's there. And I think that's one story from Onrain. I can tell you that there's about 5,000 others with similar situations and similar stories. He's himself and Nóirín are part of Onrain culture, as is Liam Clancy and all those people. But I hope I've done something in. I can show more clips of the film, and I've lots more clips of Onrain in that. But I don't think you need it. I think we understand, and as Sheila said as well, that between worlds, and that we're all there, and we've so much to learn from each other. And shin machid, and go raibh míle maithbh go léir agus hása gom gomach siad go léir anna hásta agus háin cinnte Mástro ag bhfuil na flachaseán in Ainsley an éair go bhfuil Mícheál treis ana éigean a chur ar a hana bhár.
Just one clip from that.
Okay. Yeah.
I do had a question, in fact, it's for Maggie, right? Your friend of Helen's here this evening. And you were asking, so where was that
I just was interested in where the music was being played, where the house was looked abandoned.
That was in the old sailor's house in Limerick. So it was a disused building right on the river, as it would happen as well, the river being the theme. So it was right on the river at the docks in Limerick. Yeah, that's where we filmed those. And it was quite interesting, you're right, because I suppose with that old worldly theme or tapping back into our past, the space was perfect because it just gave a hint of the past. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I do have a couple of stories. I'm probably the only music faculty who was here when Mícheál and Nóirín came in 1989, and just the importance of that moment in time for Boston College, because the music department was just getting started. The Irish Studies program, at least the music side of it, was just getting started, and Mícheál and Nóirín were so important for that beginning, particularly with the late Anne Lucas and Anne Shapiro, because she and Mícheál and Nóirín just had the same view of what music was about. And it's embedded really in the music department because back then in 1989, it was very unusual for a music major to require that people do their classical things but also study world music, totally unheard of, and that there was a requirement that everybody had to be a performer in some way, even if it was just you were doing drum ensemble or something that you had to show. So it's the way that Mícheál and Nóirín sort of set in stone that vision, and just to let them know it still has maintained. And then I do have one story about Nóirín. There was a lovely party that Anne Shapiro gave in her house, which was an old Victorian just down the road in Newton. And the party it was a 3-story Victorian, and it was crowded. Things were going along, and then this noise came from upstairs, and it was Nóirín running down the stairs going, forget what she called it, but I think she said, "Where's my box? Where's my box?" She may have said harmonium or something. And she grabbed it and then ran back upstairs, and all of a sudden, this heavenly sound came as she sang there. And we finally later learned that she had seen a statue of St. Francis. And she had a vow that whenever she saw a statue of St. Francis, she would sing a song. And it was one of the most memorable music moments I've ever experienced.
St. Francis was upstairs in Newton?
The sound of her voice penetrating the house and transcending that moment. And it was a lesson that music is not necessarily about a concert hall. You know, music is around you everywhere. And it was one of the greatest moments I've experienced.
The door's a little fussy, right, Rachel? Yes, Catherine.
Yes, this was just an absolutely terrific evening on top of
last night. And it brought me back to my time when I was directing Irish Studies on a federal program at Westfield. It was trying to bring the richness of Irish culture to the broad audience, not just the students, but people in the Springfield area. And I very much wanted to include music in the curriculum development that was going to be part of this program. And the woman who was the musical historian in the college was very, very much a classical enthusiast. And when I suggested to her that we would have to bring in some traditional music into our performance program, she kind of looked at me in horror when I wanted to do this. And I said, well, look, we have to embrace the whole bit of Irish musical culture, and the people here in the Springfield area know Irish traditional music very, very well, all the people from Kerry and Blasket Islands. So she reneged, and we had Patty Maloney, we had Thomas O'Canning from University of Cork, who did a lecture on Shannon and really blew everybody away. And even though my colleague Catherine didn't lose her kind of skeptical views of traditional music, she did go to Ireland, went to Cork on my advice that this is where music was studied and was happening. And she connected there with somebody who was on the faculty, Jared Victory, who had a symphony that he couldn't get produced or premiered anywhere. And because this was in the classical tradition, Catherine and Jared got along very, very well. And we were able, along with the Irish American Cultural Institute, to join forces, Westfield and the Cultural Institute, to have the premiere of Gerald Victory's symphony in Springfield Symphony Hall with 3,000 people coming to the performance. It was absolutely great. And of course, what was particularly good about it was it boosted the numbers who attended the grant program, which made the federal government very happy under this program that was started by President Carter. And of course, we all know what happened. He lasted one term, and his successor came in, Ronald Reagan, and all my money got cut off. So then we had to do it, ad hoc. But that goes to show that the resistance to the traditional music was here in America back at that time. But we did make a couple of breakthroughs with Patty Maloney, Thomas Canning, and Sean Potts and his group came and did an absolutely fantastic performance on the pipes and with young Shannon and Nóirín and Art McMahon, I think, was also in that group. So that's just the story that these kinds of challenges came to Massachusetts at both ends of the state, and we managed to do something with them.
Well, applause for that. Who else has a story? Good. Tom Dignes. There we are.
Tom Dignes. I had no idea this was going to happen tonight. First of all, I want to thank the family, the presenters, the organizers. This has been one of the most, they're all quite moving, but one of the most moving events that I've been involved with here at Boston College. It was incredible. So thank you all for that. Particular though, for you, Helen, and this is what really almost had to knock me out of my seat, is about 5 years ago, our daughter, who is not only a design engineer, she's also an aerial performer. She spent time at Fidget Feet, and later in that training series, we were up at Ennis, staying at a dear friend's house. I was driving her down past the big football stadium every morning in commuter traffic and taking her to your campus. And when I first saw it, just the unique architecture was like, and the bridge going across. I dropped her off, and she went into the studio, And then I managed to get in. You have a pretty open campus. It kept me a little warm on some very rainy Irish mornings, even in the summer. And I just started walking around, and so I did that every day for the week that they were performing and practicing on your campus, in that building that we saw. And I come back every night and I go, what world is this? And I had no idea that it's the whole package here, you know? I mean, that it started from so I didn't mind. I just had a great time there. My daughter loved it. She still performs locally. She instructs here in Imperial Arts, and she just got her master's from Harvard in design engineering, working for NASA and for the Wyss Institute. So to your point is, these people are not just, they're not just notation writers. They're not, and yours as well. They're out there everywhere. You want to get them into, I think what Mícheál was talking about is, they're musicians first, and they may not read music, and they may not be able to write music, but they are part of this human parade that we have. And it sounds like they've got space at your world.
What you just said there, what world is this? It's
That's
the
it.
world
I said,
we want,
what
isn't it?
world is
It's the
this?
world we want. It's
I
so
had
beautifully
never
put.
seen a place like that
Yes,
before.
that's what world
So
is
thank
this.
you, thank you.
Okay, stand up, make your bows. Come on. Come on. Stand up,
With the family.
just stand up. All right, now we're gonna go.
Maggie goes. Yeah, we're coming.
And I leave you with
We're just embarrassing him now.
a little saying that Mícheál used to often say, and that is, he used to often tell the anecdote about two traditional fiddlers from County Clare who were in conversation, and they're traditional fiddlers, and one says to the other, do you read music or are you gifted?